So our mission, we are kind of in the northeast part of Mexico, about 2 or 3 hours south of Houston, and we're pretty close to the border. And so our mission covered, I think it was 6 cities. We had part of Monterrey, a very small chunk. We didn't have any of the main city, just a little kind of the outskirts. We also had Guadalupe, which is the majority of the mission, and then Apodaca, which is another big city, and Juarez. We also had Cadereyta and China. China was the farthest area away from the mission home. It was about 2 hours away, and it's just a little small town. And Cadereyta came in second. That was about an hour away from the mission home. So the mission was really pretty small. All of my areas were within about 20 minutes of each other. I served in Guadalupe, in Monterrey, and in Juarez. And they were all very different areas. Monterrey and Guadalupe are a lot more affluent. Monterrey is a very Americanized place. There are a lot of American companies like Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, Carl's Jr., Little Caesars, like all these little American, well, not little, but these American franchises. And it's very Americanized as well with the culture, a lot of American music, but it's still Mexico. And so it's still pretty run down in places. In Monterrey, I was a secretary in the mission for 10 and a half months of my mission. And so I was in the mission offices, which was the most affluent area. That was in Guadalupe, and part of our area had Monterrey. And in that area, it was very affluent, a lot of big businesses. And then I was also serving in Guadalupe, in a different part of Guadalupe, which was a lot more humble circumstances, and also in Juarez, which was probably the most humble area that I was in. The city kind of has a bad reputation for being pretty dangerous. I never really saw that. You hear a lot of stories about missionaries that get mugged or different things in missions around the world, but I was never robbed or mugged, or I don't know. So it's a pretty safe place. It's kind of starting out just kind of what it looks like in Monterrey. There are a lot of mountains in Monterrey. It's beautiful. There's a mountain, it's called El Cerro de la Silla, and it's just this huge mountain. It's kind of iconic of Monterrey if you look up Google Images. And just a lot of mountains. It's very green in some parts. It's also very dry in some parts, but they get a lot of rain, and it gets really hot and really cold there as well. Religiously, just like every other part in Mexico, there are a ton of Catholics. 95% of the doors you'll knock are Catholic. Also a big Christian, non-denominational Christian foundation there. So they have a ton of churches there, Christian churches, and also a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. They were always out. And so we'd always try to avoid the streets that they were knocking doors on, because that you don't want to cause problems there. But yeah, I think kind of those main three groups. We didn't really see much atheism. It was still there. It just wasn't as prevalent. Definitely more Catholic, Christian, Jehovah's Witnesses based. In Monterrey, there also was a temple. It was about 20 minutes outside of our mission, but we would go every 3 months to do temples sessions there. So that was awesome. That was a great opportunity to kind of just de-stress a little bit, to go to the temple. But yeah, the church is very, very strong in Monterrey. In one of my wards, when I was serving in a ward called Andalusia, which is in Juarez, we had the ex-temple president, we had the ex-MTC president of Mexico, we had, just a ton of stake leaders. It was incredible. A lot of my wards that I served in had about 1,000 people on the church, on the records, and the majority of the wards had about 80 to 250 people going each week. We only had one branch in the ward, which is China, and the rest of the areas are wards. So that's really nice. That kind of shows how big the church is there. But yeah, it's definitely growing. So daily, I mean, everybody leaves the house at 10 o'clock. And we would work from about 10 to 2. And every day you eat food with the members at 2 o'clock, or eat lunch with the members at 2 o'clock. And then from 3 to 9 o'clock, you keep going. We aren't allowed a dinner break. And so we would go from 3 to 9, and then you eat dinner when you get home. We would try to work a lot through the members. Sometimes it was a little bit tough. So a lot of our work came through contacts that we had made, our proselyting efforts. But we had a lot of success finding new investigators, a lot of success teaching. I mean, we would teach 20 to 40 lessons a week, depending on how the area was. But we had a lot of success. And I mean, it was always better to try to work through the members as well, because you never know what you're going to get through contacts, but usually if it comes from a member, it's a pretty solid reference. And so we worked a lot through references as well. So I guess because all my areas were so close together, there weren't huge differences. I guess with the ward that I was in the offices, it was just known for being the richest, the wealthiest. And so that area was a little bit more difficult to track and to find people in, of course, because of the how affluent it was. In Guadalupe, it was a lot easier to find people to teach and to teach. I guess Guadalupe is more known for just being kind of the biggest area in the mission. The majority of the areas in the mission are in Guadalupe and Apodaca and Juarez. So kind of those main three. With Apodaca and Juarez kind of being the more humble areas, Guadalupe is kind of in between, and some parts of Guadalupe and Monterrey kind of being a little bit more wealthy. Also, some parts of Monterrey that had the outskirts of the city were the most dangerous, more poor areas. But you kind of just get a big mix of different things. The weather, I mean, it is super humid there. And so that causes it to be very hot and humid, and also very cold and miserable. The housing circumstances were pretty standard. We would live 2 missionaries to a house. That's a rule throughout Mexico, I believe. And so we never lived with more than one companionship of missionaries. And that made it easier, I think, just easier to work. All of my houses had air conditioning, which was a huge thing. When I got to the mission, that wasn't the case, but the area presidency in Mexico kind of made that rule halfway through my mission. So all the houses now have air conditioning in at least one room, which is typically where you sleep, because you don't want to be sleeping when it's 110 degrees inside your house. All of the houses are made of concrete, and so they kind of insulate the heat and they insulate the cold. And so, I mean, there were a lot of times where in the winter I'd be seeing my breath inside the house, and a lot of times in the summer when you're just sweating bullets because it's so hot in there. But it's incredible. I mean, it was really cool to see that different aspect of living, because we're so privileged in the U.S. And so to see how other people throughout the world live, it's really humbling.